It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is episode number 40, Beneath the Helmet, Season 2. Huge shout out to everyone who's been following our podcast. I got some good news that our website is totally revamped and totally changed. So if you'd like to check it out, beneaththehelmet.ca, you'll see lots of great new features for you as the listener beneath the helmet. So be sure to check it out, and love to have you join our community on Facebook as well. Brand new community that's launched, and it's just like-minded individuals like yourself who want to share stories about their own journeys through mental health, through leadership in the fire service, and other first responder agencies. And also a chance for you to learn from others who share great content, posts, and it's just a well-supported community that's safe. Today I got a chance to sit down with Lexipol's Fire Rescue 1 executive editor, Marc Bashoor. So Marc, as you may or may not know, he's in the hospital right now. He's got some medical challenges he's facing. So I wanted to bump Marc up into the queue to lift his spirits up a little bit. So hopefully you can all comment down below, send him messages, and make sure that he sees that you're out there supporting him as well. So Marc Bashoor, I hope you have a speedy recovery and get home soon. So today's conversation is very kind of niched into what Marc's passion is all about. He's got 3 pillars that we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about trust, we're going to talk about honor, and we're going to talk about ethics within the fire service. And we're going to chat about some things that are getting us in trouble as firefighters and in the fire service. I really think you're going to enjoy the nuggets and the wisdom that this very prestigious leader in North American Fire Service has to share with us today. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Until next time, stay well. All right, welcome back, everyone. I got Marc Bashoor on the show today, coming all the way from Florida this morning. So welcome to the show, Marc.
Thanks, Chief. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Nice and early morning, and get a chance to talk to one of the fire service experts in North America. So it's a pleasure to have you on there.
There's no experts. We're all in this together, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. Well, you have a very distinguished career, so I want to recognize that as well. So, Chief, tell us a little bit about your history and kind of your story and what brought you to what you're doing today for the fire service.
To tell the story, I really have to start from when I was a kid, and I'll make it quick. But, my father was a World War II veteran. When he came back from the war, he was both a Baptist minister and a United States Postal Service mailman for 30 years concurrently. He did those 2 things concurrently. So as I grew up, my household was pretty strict. I was always afraid of the post office belt, and things today that would get parents in trouble, right, were the way I grew up. And in the evolution of that, was what introduced me to the topic we're going to talk about today, which was, how people mold trust, honor, and ethics in their life, because I saw it every day from my dad, whether it was the war stories or the pastoring and the things that went on with it. So he was a pastor and a mailman concurrently for 30 years. I'm the middle son. Fast forward to sort of today, because 2 of us are retired, but fast forward to today, my older brother was a mailman in Washington State, and my younger brother is a preacher in California. And then there was me. So they fell from branches of that tree, and I kind of came from the service branch, and here we are.
Mm-hmm.
I started as a volunteer in Prince George's County, Maryland in 1981. And then, kind of the rest is history, really. I stayed with Prince George's County for 30 years altogether. I rose through the ranks, came on the job as a paid firefighter, worked in dispatch, rose through the ranks, ultimately became chief of department and stayed in that until 2017. then went to West Virginia, was an emergency services director there for 5 years. Then ultimately down to Florida, where I was a public safety director and fire chief. They wanted me to build a combination department out of 10 independent volunteer departments. So that's what I did. I got them up off the ground and retired, if you will, from that, to where now, as executive editor for firerescue1.com and firechief.com, I write, do the video work, and I do a lot of different things, speak at conferences, and do some acting on the side too. But that's a whole different thing. So that's it in a nutshell. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. I've seen some posts that you've put out there on social about your acting. Maybe a brief. Is that like a hobby that you enjoyed, or is that more of
something I started in 2018, and it was just I was comfortable in front of the camera, and when somebody said something to me about it, I researched a website, and the rest is history.
very cool.
Probably 20 different commercials. People see me from time to time on commercials, and I'll get a text, or probably a dozen different movies. None of them, are a box office hit.
Yeah.
They're out there, and I'm having fun doing that. You never know where it leads.
Yeah.
A lot of famous actors. There's a lot of famous actors out there that didn't start until they were in their 50s and 60s. So, maybe I'm one of them. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, 100%. Are you going to be in a Hallmark Christmas movie that I might see this year?
I was in 9 Hallmark movies last year. And
awesome.
So you just have to look for them because they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Some of them I was either a police officer on a beach walking back and forth on a crime scene, or and in some cases there was a speaking role. But like I said, none of them are big roles. They're all minor.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a fun part of life. Good for you. Good for you. Good for you. Well, you have a very distinguished career, and I think there's lots of nuggets to kind of draw out of our conversation today. But I kind of want to have it streamlined to those 3 kind of main pillars that you talked about. So let's kick it off with trust. I'd love to hear some stories about how you've built trust over the years, and maybe some areas that were a challenge for you.
Yeah, and when I talk about trust, it's multifaceted, right? It's about trusting your neighbor or trusting yourself. It's about those things, but it's really, in the fire service perspective, about the public trust and their ability to trust us to do the right thing. And a lot of what I find, and what when I go and speak at different departments, I'll be in Pennsylvania in a couple of weeks, and then New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland for a series of places where we're going to talk a lot about the public trust and the things that we do that get ourselves in trouble, and then how we can set ourselves on a better path, whether that is from mutual aid agreements, or doing away with the chip on the shoulder of it's my first due, or those kind of things. When the public dials 911, all they know is we're going to show up. They don't care whether they're paid or volunteer, black or white, man or woman. They don't care if your firehouse is 5 miles away or 50 miles away. They care that someone's going to show up and going to be the right person to do the right things. And too many times we don't. And then, that whole trust factor wraps into our ability to trust our crew members, and that we've all trained to the right measure. And that if one of us gets ourselves in trouble, and I don't mean legal trouble, because if you get yourself in legal trouble, you need to deal with it. You need to deal with that appropriately. I'm not going to come get you out of trouble. That's not trust. It's being a parent. And, we have a 911 business to run, whether we like it or not. So we've got to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep people from getting into those situations where they find themselves violating trust. So that's really a big piece of it. And I think that if people can think for all of these things, if people can think in terms of, you mentioned the triad, I call it the personal success tetrahedron. If they can think in terms of their physical strength, which is both physical strength and nutrition, but their physical strength, their moral focus, and their mental toughness, if they can get those 3 things, triad, to work together and do all the right things to build that strength, then the bottom side of the tetrahedron is the mission. That's going to take care of itself, because you're taking care of yourself. So we work, when I talk to folks, we work on methods to do that, whether it's talking to them about establishing a personal mission statement, whether it's talking to them about leadership steps for success, and understanding that, sometimes there's a couple of those, or sometimes there's things that you're going to want to do that you just should not do, and vice versa. Sometimes there's going to be things that you don't want to do that you're going to need to do. Those are going to be, those two things right there for chiefs are one of the hardest things as they come up through. And we talk about building trust within your organization. Those two things are two of the hardest things for chiefs to understand. Sometimes you're just going to have to do something you don't want to do, but it's the right thing to do, and vice versa. Don't do the wrong thing. So yeah, if we can have people build towards those leadership skills, build towards that personal mission statement, so what and why you're out there. And, I didn't just come take a job, or I didn't just show up and volunteer. What's your why? I task the people to think through that. And if they can think through that and build within themselves, then they're going to build that trust within their community.
Yeah, I think trust is the foundation. I know you talked about the mission, but trust is the foundation for everything else, right? So if we don't start with trust, which is part of the mission statement and part of our own personal values, everything else is going to be a real challenge to get to a certain point in your life.
Yep, absolutely.
How is the U.S. right now in public trust?
Well, it is interesting to watch things unfold as different legal cases unfold that tax our systems. We see communities becoming anxious mostly about law enforcement, and unfortunately, fire and EMS is finding themselves wrapped up in that. Our challenge is to go back to that tetrahedron and remember we're there about the mission. Our mission does not, as line firefighters, our mission does not involve police work per se. So there comes a point where we need to understand when it's time to draw back, and we need to listen to the command level folks and make sure that we're working within that unified command if that's what we're dealing with, or we're reporting back and saying, this just isn't somewhere we should be. So we've got to make sure that we're not, we're staying on top of background checks. We're staying on top of all the things that have to do with our folks in public trust, to make sure that, erosion of public trust isn't something that affects the fire service. Right now, I think we're still one of those most trusted agencies of government.
Mm-hmm. What would be a couple from your experience of areas that do get us in trouble with the public that maybe it would be good to bring to people's attention?
There have been several lately that I've seen. There's a couple different things we'll talk about. One is vehicle driving.
Mm.
We have this, when I say we, I mean the fire service in general. We have this notion that we own the road, and we don't. Okay. Nobody owns the road per se. And we will get into that whole discussion. That could be a whole nother show for you. We have this notion that we own the road, and I just put a new video into one of my presentations of an ambulance coming right through a red light. It gets broadsided by a bus and flips the ambulance over. The bus had a green light, the ambulance had a red light. We can't continue to. I've got two fire trucks in a major city that hit each other in an intersection. One of them had a green light, one of them had a red light. We can't continue to allow those things to be the things that our people see when we're driving. We have to respect the road and the rules of the road just as much as Grandma Jones or Mr. and Mrs. Smith do. And if we don't drive it home to our people, whether that's seatbelts, there's no excuse for someone there's almost no excuse for someone getting thrown out of a fire truck that rolls over. Sure, catastrophic failure of a seatbelt system. I get it. If you're seatbelted in, it's highly unlikely you're going to get thrown out of one of those vehicles and then have the vehicle roll over on top of you because you just got thrown out of it. Seatbelts are important. Speed is important. Every jurisdiction is a little different in what they allow over a speed limit. Due caution is those words that a lawyer is going to look at. Where are you using due caution? Red lights are pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of gray area in a red light.
Yep.
And I think if we, so that's one area when we talk about what are the things that erode the trust in us is if people continue to see fire trucks and ambulances blowing through intersections like they own the road, people are not going to, continue to react positively to us if that's all they see from us.
Mm.
The other, and again, I have multiples of situations where firefighters are involved in a firefight of some kind or a firefighting operation or even medical calls and things come up missing from a home. Several where a patient was put onto a cot and in that cot they had a clip of money and the clip of money came up missing. And a lot of times it's not the fire department's fault, but sometimes it is. And we should never be in a position where we're allowing our people to either get away with that, number one, but number two, we should make sure that we're bringing people on that are going to have that mindset. Their mindset's going to be, I'm here to protect that public trust. And that public trust as a definition says that, basically we will do no more harm than has already been done. So when we show up in a home, we're there at the right time, at the right place, at the right time with the right people and stuff to do the right thing. But ultimately, the definition is that we'll do no more harm than has already been done. And if we end up getting ourselves in a situation where things are stolen or things come up missing and we have no explanation for it, well, then we violated that trust. So that's a big one. And then third one, that's really something I try to talk to fire departments about across the country, is this whole notion of mutual aid or first due, paid versus volunteer. Again, when someone calls 911, they don't care. They want the right people to show up to do the right things. And I talk about a case in Pennsylvania, ironically, a case where it was a fatal house fire in 2022. And it was in a section of a town that was all volunteer, but it bordered, and when I say bordered, directly across the street was the city. And that city paid department had 2 firehouses within 2 miles of that scene. The closest volunteer house was 5 miles away. And then the mutual aid companies that they called, which weren't automatic, they were, they called them after the fact once they knew they had a fire, they were 25 minutes away. Yet there were 2 fully paid companies within 2 miles. So, even if you give them 30 miles an hour, that's, 2 to 4 minutes. That those companies could have been there. And unfortunately, that's a chance that resident will never have. We'll never know whether that resident could have benefited from that, but I highly suspect they could have. So that whole notion of mutual aid and city boundaries, I know there's lawyers involved. I know there's insurance issues involved. There's all kinds of liability things involved. At the end of the day, the fire doesn't care, and the 911 caller doesn't care. And someone can end up paying for it. I don't want our fire departments to be the ones caught up in the middle of that. And unfortunately, we find ourselves caught up in that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It irks me every time I see some bad news about either a firefighter arson or theft or sexual assaults and harassment. It's like, it just irks me every time I see that. It's just, that is not who we are.
Right. It's not. And the really unfortunate thing, because I've had some people ask, why don't you show us the good things? The good things don't make the media.
Yes.
Let's face it. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, you'll get a good story, but it makes local news. And unless someone sends me that, I can't capture it because I can't watch every 50 states TV for local news. It's the things that make national headlines or those sensational things, and they're typically not good.
Yeah, agree.
So it is what it is.
Yeah. I think the public trust is number one, but I also believe there's an element, and you mentioned it, of trust within the organization. Any tips to build trust within an organization, with your own crew, with the chief, with the unions? Any thought there?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I'll go back to the mission statement. It all starts with, when I talked about the individual personal mission statement, The organization needs to have its own mission statement, and it doesn't need to be some long paragraph on the wall that nobody has any idea what it says. I brought both to Prince George's County and then down to Florida. Our mission statements in those organizations was one word, and that's service.
Mm-hmm.
That's all people need to understand when it comes to mission. Sure, when it comes to budget documents and all the other things where I have to justify to elected officials why we need, money X, Y, and Z. Sure, there are bullets that talk about what all of those different benchmarks are and service levels need to be and all those different things that go into making the mission, making the service work out. But at the end of the day, the organization has to have a solid mission statement, and it needs to make sure that everybody knows what that mission statement is. And then they need to live by it. You can't be a service agency one day and pick something, a dog groomer the next day, and expect that your employees are going to have any respect for the organization. So the organization needs to pick what that mission statement looks like, and they need to deliver on that. They need to value what the employees and volunteers bring to the table. Not just value what they say, but value what they bring to the table. There's a lot been said about DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of people roll their eyes at, but at the end of the day, it's truth. We need to value each other's opinions, and we need to value each other's cultures and histories that we bring to the table. I'll go back to what I said before, though, because there's always a qualifier. Grandma Jones doesn't care. She doesn't care whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're Jewish, whether you're black, white, whatever. When she calls 911, she needs you to show up. And we need to make sure that our organizations are geared that way, and that they know that they value what the people bring to the table, they value what those cultural differences are, but that their people also value that service mission. And then communicate to your people. One of the biggest things that I see, and I'm going to, this is a double-edged sword, right? So I'm going to throw the sword back at people. One of the biggest things that I see out of organizations, and I'll ask them in my bigger presentations, I'll ask them in between the first section and the second section, we'll talk about what are the two biggest issues affecting your organization. And I'm not asking them to blurt it out because, you'll get all kinds of all over the place stuff, but I ask them to put it on paper anonymously. I don't ask their chief about it. I just ask them, what are the two biggest or most significant issues affecting your department? And then in between the breaks, I analyze what people have put down, and we spend 15 to 30 minutes talking about what those issues are. That's one of the things I don't see departments doing, is not just asking people what's the biggest issues of the department, but is communicating with their people, giving them the opportunity to say, hey, chief, I think if we could do this, then that might get better. Just, anything like that. That communication, though, is absolutely a two-way street. And I called it, when I came into Prince George's County as chief, we were still, when I first came in, we were still sending paper documents out for everything. Every order, every memo, you name it, it was a paper document. And if there was a volunteer organization, a volunteer and paid in the same house, each house would get 3 different sets of the same paper. The chief, the president, the career staff. So I called it the Paper Reduction Act of, it was 2011. And we stopped doing that. Everything went by email. Everybody in the organization, paid volunteer, this goes back to valuing your people. Everybody in the organization was assigned a county email address. It took a while to get it on the volunteer side, but we were able to get it. They were all assigned a county email address, and everybody got the same communication, whether it was from the chief or from the office, the fire marshal, whoever. They all got the same information at the same time. So the double edge of that sword was people got to look at their email now. Where before they were waiting for the paper to show up in the mail, sitting back with the, smoking their cigar or whatever, which you can't do in a firehouse anymore, but they were waiting for that paper to show up. Now they got to look at their email and realize that there's no more of this. Well, we're going to give it 2 weeks because everybody's got to get the paper. Everybody's got to have time for it to get through the system and get the paper. It comes like that in an email. It is now policy, or whatever the date is of the policy. So people have to read their email. So I had a lot of success in communicating with our people by email. And if they had a really important issue and they needed to email me directly, email me directly. So, but make sure that you already vetted that through your chain of command before you come to me with some, I'll call it trivial, before you come to me with some trivial thing. Because the first thing I'm going to ask you on that is, have you spoken to your supervisor? So it wasn't a open door like, oh my God, the chief anybody can talk to the chief. It was an open door, but there was still a door. And you needed to make sure that people respected that from the communication perspective. But if the organization can communicate with their people, value their people, give them access to the information and not trying to hide everything or make everything some big conspiracy of whatever, they'll go a long way towards building the trust within the organization. Then company officers have to do the same thing. I had a battalion chief one time. We had a significant safety investigation from an incident. It had a battalion chief come in with a training program that we collectively came up with. And when I say we collectively, we had a large team of people that was involved in this training program to bring everybody onto the same page to avoid some of the problems that were identified in the safety investigation report. And it was some controversial stuff from the way Prince George just kind of used to do things. Well, the battalion chief came in, and as some people would right away think, he threw it on the table and said, "Here you go, guys. It's from the chief. It's something we got to do. I don't believe in it, but whatever. It's what we got to do." So what did that do to the people? Right? I mean, we communicated it, but our line supervisor, or in this case, our chief officer, didn't take it and deliver the message in an appropriate, proper way. So we've got to make sure that our line officers are part of that trust network and that they're building that trust network with us. And if we have differences, we're talking about that in our chiefs meetings and not on the engine room floor where we're throwing something down saying, "I don't believe in it." So, I think that's probably the biggest way organizations can improve in that triad of trust is to communicate with their people and value what their people bring to the table.
Yes, I agree 100%. I love how you address the open door, because I know for myself, and I know a lot of other chiefs, that open door is great for communication, but it's also exhausting if you don't manage it right.
Yeah, there's still
and your management style of that, I think, is very appropriate, right? Of, hey, have you talked to your line officer? Have you talked to your captain, your lieutenant? Because that really frees it up and allows you to do the important stuff, right? Versus, like you say, those menial little requests. So
yeah, and you don't dismiss someone just because they call you. I mean, people aren't going to feel valued if you dismiss them.
Yeah.
But they also need to follow the chain of command, and they need to make sure that they're doing the right thing on their end all along the way. And I think we had some good success with that.
Yeah, and on the flip side, if the officers are not getting the experience of managing those things, how are they ever going to be proficient at that? So if they never get the opportunity, so
absolutely.
So I'd love to dive a little bit into ethics. Ethics to me is a pretty important aspect of life, and part of the reason I left the fire service was a bit of moral injury. So that kind of plays into the ethical part of it, and I'd love to hear your parts of like why are you so passionate about ethics in the fire service, and what can we learn from that?
So I go back to my upbringing and understanding and seeing what went on in the church and how that shaped my understanding of strong ethical character in not only in individuals, but in organizations. And I've carried that into what I do at work. And, there's a lot of talk about higher education and education in general. And education is important. Don't get me wrong. I am not your 3 master's degree fire chief. That's not me. Master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees don't necessarily make you smart. They make you educated. You've got to take that education and take that development of everything that you do and build it into uh, a life that values the the experiences that you've been through, but also values doing the right thing. And when you talk about ethics, um, there's no one book on the shelf. There's no plaque on the wall. There's no degree certificate I'm going to be able to point to tell you what ethics means. Ultimately, when you look at the core of ethics, it may not be illegal, but you have to decide whether it's the right thing to do. And I liken it to what I give people is the wall judge. Okay, so I tell them to pick a point on the wall. So in this particular show, I'm going to look at the word fire that's right behind your head. Okay, that can be my wall judge. And if you're talking to me and you're saying, Chief, we need to do X, Y, Z, and I don't really know, but I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about it, I'm looking at the word fire. And if that's my wall judge. And if my wall judge looks at me and kind of shrugs his shoulders or gives me the thumbs up, then, that's my sixth sense saying, okay, it's probably a good thing. But if that wall judge goes, are you freaking crazy? Looks at me and gives me, and I get that feeling, it's probably time to step back. Take that step back and think about, and maybe I say to you, thanks, Chief. I'm going to chew on that for a bit. Let me think about that. You've got to be able to process that in real time, because people come to you and they want answers, like this. They want answers right away. You can't always give answers right away. That wall judge, I go back to my parents and I'll tell a quick story about me as a young volunteer. I think back to my parents and my parents would, when I would say, well, Johnny gets to do it. And they would say, what? Would say, well, if Johnny jumped off a cliff, would you jump after him? And of course, as a young kid, I go, maybe, I don't know. So I go back to that wall judge is my parents over my shoulder going, are you going to do that? When I was a young volunteer at the age of 16, I took firefighting and EMT right away. I was riding fire trucks and ambulances very quickly. So I was still in school. And in my senior stretch of high school, so it's 9th, 10th, 11th grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, there were 19 of my classmates that died in drunk driving accidents. I was a young volunteer picking up many of them. And by picking them up, I mean on the ambulance, usually on the ambulance, picking them up. And I was picking them up dead. I wasn't picking them up and saving them or able to help them in any way. I was picking them up dead. Some of them were good friends. Some of them I didn't know. We had 600 people, graduating, so I didn't know everybody there, but some of them I knew. And as a individual, that was certainly a pivotal time in my life where alcohol was a big deal for teenagers, obviously. It was the time where Mothers Against Drunk Driving became a thing and it came out of that environment. And I was at that pivotal time in my life. And I had that wall judge and my parents, and I kept thinking back of, well, if Johnny jumped off a cliff, would you jump after him? And I was at that point in my life where I had to decide, was I going to follow those 19 people off the road? Because I don't think that any one of the 19 of them jumped in the car and thought, I'm going to go kill myself today. But that's what happened. And they made a decision to drink and drive. They didn't understand the consequences of what they were doing. And I set myself about that as a mission. So I don't drink. I never have. From that point forward, I made the decision that I'm not going to be a drinker. And that goes back to, we talked a long time ago in this about practice what you preach. When I preach honor in what you do and ethics of what you do, I don't just talk about not drinking and driving. I don't drink and drive. I do wear my seatbelt all the time. I'm by no means am I an angel in the world. Okay, let's be clear about that. but I am doing the best I can to be as ethically present as I can. And if you want to put it in firefighters terms, we talk about what this wall judge is and whether it's the right thing to do. I think, and this is firefighter terms, okay? So as I say this, I think all of us have been around the firehouse and looked at somebody and said, well, look at that idiot, whatever the situation was. So maybe your wall judge needs to be you looking at the word fire behind you and going, would an idiot do that? And if the answer is yes, then you probably shouldn't do it. So I think that whole ethics piece, we make it more difficult than it is. There is a lot of self-control that goes into it, but you also need to learn what's right and wrong. And, there's so much today of this, what people will call fake news and fake everything else. There's a whole lot of opportunity for you to make decisions based on what you see and hear in front of you. And you need to do that. You need to not just dismiss it. So I think as we go into Grandma Jones's house and we see that wad of money sitting on the counter, or we see that diamond earring laying there next to, whatever on the dresser while they're doing CPR, that we take stock of those things, especially as officers, we take stock of those things and make sure that we do the right thing, which is that we don't do any more harm than has already been done. So whether that's putting those things in place that aren't visible anymore, whether that's making sure that a law enforcement officer gets those things, whatever it is, it's all part of ethics, is doing that right thing. And, you probably heard it said before, doing the right thing, whether anybody's watching or not.
Yeah, to me, ethics, it boils down to it's such a simple thing. It's just do the right thing. But I know it gets us in trouble, and it's hard to define what is the right thing. Sometimes.
No book on the wall, no
Exactly.
book, no black on the wall.
Yeah.
Go back to, so I have an acronym for that, JDTRT, just do the right thing.
Nice. Love it. I love the jury, or not the jury, the judge. I love the judge. That's good.
All
One.
good.
Yeah. So you mentioned the word honor, and I know that's a big part of this triad that we talk about. So how does honor play into the fire service, and how are we to use it?
Yeah. So when we look at so I'm going to talk two different triads. When we look at the triad of the personal success tetrahedron, we're talking about physical strength, moral focus, and mental toughness. Those are the three triads of that. When I'm talking about values, the core values are the trust, honor, and ethics. And the honor part of this is not only honoring our past and present, honoring what it is that we do, honoring the sacrifice that others that came before us have made, whether it was consciously or unconsciously, or not consciously, not unconsciously, the sacrifices that they've made. And one of the biggest ways that we can do that is by not allowing the term lessons learned to become problems identified simply. Because what happens when we get these safety investigation reports and, maybe even training reports from big incidents and things? Typically at the end, there's this list of recommendations, right? There's a whole list of recommendations. We had a significant incident, and this is about honoring the sacrifice that others had made. We had a significant incident in 2012 where 7 firefighters were burned. One of them was burned critically. There was another critical due to an innovation issue that went away pretty quickly. But so there was 2 critical out of those 7. We had a significant safety, and I was chief of department. We had a significant safety investigation that went forward with that. Brought in every alphabet soup you can think of to look into it, to make sure that there was no stone unturned. It was the closest thing at the time that I had as chief of department to a line of duty death. The one young volunteer firefighter was in a coma for the first 2 weeks, and ultimately he did survive the incident. But we had significant recommendations come out of the safety investigation report. In fact, in total, when it was distilled down, there were 46 recommendations. The interesting thing, and I knew this going in, okay, the interesting thing was that I knew some of those recommendations had been addressed in previous reports. I'd seen them. Couldn't remember exactly where. I had staff go back and find all the safety investigation reports that they could find that were similar in nature. Okay, so a significant fire, residential with injury to firefighters. And I had them compare the lessons learned. They were able to go back 20 years. And in those 20 years, there were 23 of the recommendations of that particular report, 23 of them that had been recommendations made in previous safety investigation reports. So it's 23 recommendations that just became problems identified. They weren't lessons learned, because if they were lessons learned, we would have done something about it. They were just problems identified. And what did we do with them? We put them on the shelf. I challenge every fire department out there that's going to be doing a safety investigation of a significant incident to do the same thing. Go find your previous safety investigation recommendations and do that comparison. And one of those 23 recommendations resulted in a firefighter fatality in Prince George's County in 1992. So they weren't just nickel and dime fires. These were significant recommendations that were things we should have fixed and we didn't. So we set about fixing them. And that's how you honor the past of what firefighters that came before us have been through is you fix what you can fix about the problems that they encountered. Sometimes you're not going to be able to fix things, but you do what you can. You don't just identify the problem and move on. You have to make it a lesson learned. So that's one way. And then two is by making sure that we are rewarding our firefighters and our EMS personnel for jobs well done, not just on a once a year basis, but that as those heroic things happen, and maybe it's not a heroic thing, maybe it's a cat in a tree, and Grandma June sends a letter or sends an email and says, "Hey, your firefighters did a great job getting Fluffy out of the tree." Well, you know what? Those firefighters are going to get an email from the chief saying, "Thanks for a job well done." You need to honor your firefighters, and when they do the right things, just as much as you need to hold them accountable when they don't do the right things. Yeah. So that honor is, a big piece of not only honoring the past, but honoring the present as well.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. The lessons learned. That's a good nugget to share with everyone. Cause I think it probably happens more than we want to.
Well, there's at least one large city department that did a similar after we did that. They had a fatal firefighter, line of duty deaths, multiple line of duty deaths, and they did a very similar comparison. I believe some of our folks went up and were part of the safety investigation team. They did a very similar investigation and found exactly the same thing. So
it's a shame.
We can't allow that to happen. And I'll almost guarantee it's all over the country, Chief. It's a nature of our beast, and we need to tame that beast because it's going to get us.
Yeah, that's a great nugget. So I know our time's coming to a close. I'd love to hear one key message you love to have the Beneath the Helmet listeners hear from you today. What would be that one key message?
We need to put ourselves in a position, and my program's called Could You Rescue You? We need to put ourselves in a position to be able to rescue ourselves. And what I mean by that is we need to develop our own mission statements, our personal mission statements. We need to buy into our organizational mission statements. So after you've got that mission statement down, firefighters need to make sure that they're taking care of themselves. I go back to the triad of the personal success tetrahedron. They need to make sure they're taking care of physical and nutritional strength, their moral focus, and their mental toughness. And, we talk about mental toughness. When we talk about mental toughness, we always say it's okay to not be okay, right? You've heard people say that before. One thing I'd ask people to think about when we think about taking care of your mental health, and we talk about counseling or whatever you want to talk about with that, we don't go into a fire battle by ourselves. Why would we go into a mental battle by ourselves?
Nice.
There are opportunities out there to help you, to help us, that are within your department and they're outside of your department. Take advantage of those opportunities. You don't have to be in this alone. So I would take that whole "could you rescue you," have people build a personal mission statement, have people build a personal success tetrahedron, understanding that trust, honor, and ethics are the foundation of mission. The mission is the base of the tetrahedron. They can bring those things together, then they're going to be a better them, and their organization is going to be better for that.
Beautiful. Love it, Chief. We covered some great topics. I think these need to be discussed more in the fire service, and I truly think you have a very niche and defined kind of leadership mindset. I'm sure there's more to this, but breaking it down to those three nice, easy to remember kind of principles for ourselves, I think is key. So well done on that, and thanks for all the work you do in the fire service and for your time leading up to where you are today, and
Thanks, Chief.
sharing the nuggets in the magazine. So I'd love to plug all the things you're doing right now to finish us off.
Yep. Firerescue1.com, firechief.com. I certainly encourage folks to go to www.firerescue1.com. That's firerescue1.com or firechief.com or EMS1.com. Within the fire side of that, I'm the executive editor for those two. And that's just a fancy title for I'm the face of that as a chief. And I hope to drive that message in the writings that I do and in the video work we do to help build better fire departments. And then the website, if people want to visit it, it's not a tremendous amount of interactiveness to it, but it's got links to different things to help you. It is YOU rescue the letter U. So YOU rescue the letter U.com. And that's my site for drawing together some helpful hints and helpful links to help people along their path.
Awesome. Yeah, I kind of coined a word in my book, first you responder. So very kind of similar processes. We got to start taking care of number one to be able to take care of Mrs. Smith, right? So
yeah, and look for the book in the future. Could you rescue you?
yeah, good.
What the future will be on that as far as timeline, but I'm working on it.
Fantastic. Well, Chief, it's been a real honor. I really appreciate connecting with you and sharing your nuggets with our audience. So I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Chief. Time and your assistance in helping the fire service grow.
Awesome. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.